ask a question. You talked a lot about distribution and how you think that ought to be free. And I think I see that argument much better than I see the argument about how creators of zero marginal cost distribution goods will necessarily be compensated for what they create. And so I've heard a lot of, I don't think these are any of your arguments, but I've heard, okay, well, the musicians will go on tour, and so they'll make it back that way, you know, whatever time they put in, or everyone will keep creating whatever it is that they create. And this applies to more than just, you know, movies or music. It applies to books or even non-entertainment style knowledge type things. There's got to be, you hear people will still do the same amount of it because they love to do it or are interested to do it, but I don't think that quite compensates for the compensation that many of those creators now receive. And so I was wondering if you would comment a little bit on how the free distribution world, which differs from the current world in that many of the current distribution regimes were created specifically only to compensate people, will differ in terms of compensating creators.
I will say a little bit now, and in the interest of time also say that you can find in the net where I put stuff, which is at moglen.law.columbia.edu, a paper called Freeing the Mind, which addresses this question, I hope, comprehensively, or at least a little bit. Now, let me give you an answer. Historical perspective is useful here. Before Thomas Edison, there was no way for culture to be commodity. Every musician, every artist, every creator of anything before Thomas Edison was essentially in the business of doing what we now have to go back to doing, except those who lived in a world of goods that could be distributed in print, for whom you only have to step back to before Gutenberg, right? The commoditization of culture is a phenomenon of yesterday with respect to the deep history of human creativity. Whatever else we believe, and the problems are serious, we have to remind ourselves that there is no prospect that music would go away if it ceased to be commodifiable. Music is always there. It always was. What you are asking about is why do people pay for the things they care about in the way that will allow creators to go on making them? And the answer that I need to give you is that people pay out of the personal relationship that they have to the concept of making. Musicians got paid by people who heard music because they had a personal relationship to musicians. This is what you mean by going on tour, or the Grateful Dead, or anybody who uses the non-zero marginal cost of the theater seat as a way of getting back. Just as people merchandise as a way of getting back. Think for a moment about the coffee house folk musician, the singer-songwriter, the simplest case, in a way, of the transformation of the music business. Here are people who are currently on tour 40, 45, 50 weeks a year. What happens is they go to places and they perform, and at the back, CDs are on sale. But people don't buy those CDs as a kind of, you know, I would otherwise be stealing the music. They buy it the way they buy goods at a farmer's market or a crafts fair because of their personal relationship to the artist. So let me tell you what I think the owners of culture were doing in the 20th century. It took them 2 generations from Edison to figure out what their business was. And it wasn't music and it wasn't movies. It was celebrity. They created very large artificial people, you know, with navels 8 feet high. And then we had these fantasy personal relationships with the artificial big people. And those personal relationships were manipulated to sell us lots and lots of stuff. Music and movies and T-shirts and toys and, you know, sexual gratification and heaven knows what else. All of that on the basis of the underlying real economy of culture, which is that we pay for that which we have relations with. We are human beings, social animals. We have been socialized and evolved for life in the band for a very long time. And when we are given things of beauty and utility that we believe in, we actually do support them. You think that this isn't true because the current skin at the top of social life says that that's not a robust enough mechanism to sustain creation, and that the only mechanism that will sustain creation is coercive exclusion. You can't have it if you don't pay. But they can't be historically right, because the ability to coerce effectively is a thing of yesterday. And the longer, deeper history of culture is the history of the non-coercive mechanisms for securing compensation to artists, only some of which we are now in a position to improve immeasurably.
What about the software writer?
The software.
That's the kind of stuff I think I was more getting at was my question. So you have someone who creates something useful, but it has a zero distribution cost. And it's useful in a way that's not useful like celebrity, though I'm not sure. I don't think that's useful in some ways. But it's useful in a different sense, and it takes a long time to create well.
See, the programmers I worked with all my life thought of themselves as artisans, and it was very hard to unionize them. They thought that they were individual creators. Software writers at the moment have begun to lose that feeling as the world proletarianizes them much more severely than it used to. They're beginning to notice that they're workers. And not only that, but if you pay attention to the presidential campaign currently going on around us, they are becoming aware of the fact that they are workers whose jobs are movable in international trade. We are actually doing more to sustain the livelihood of programmers than the proprietary people are. Mr. Gates has only so many jobs, and he will move them to where the programming is cheapest. Just you watch. We, on the other hand, are enabling people to gain technical knowledge, which they can customize and market in the world where they live. We are making people programmers, right? And we are giving them a base upon which to perform their service activity at every level in the economy, from small to large. There is programming work for 14-year-olds in the world now because they have the whole of GNU upon which to erect whatever it is that somebody in their neighborhood wants to buy. And we are making enough value for the IBM Corporation that it's worth putting billions of dollars behind. If I were an employee of the IBM Corporation right this moment, I would consider my job more secure where it is because of free software than if free software disappeared from the face of the earth, and I don't think most of the people who work at IBM would disagree with me. Of all the people who participate in the economy of zero marginal cost, I think the programmers can see most clearly where their benefits lie. And if you just wait for a few more tens of thousands of programming jobs to go from here to Bangalore, they'll see it even more clearly.